Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we're discussing the two legions of the Lost Primarchs, as we ask where did they fit in. No real need for a spoiler warning today, as we're really just theorising and speculating. And so with that said, let's waste no time and just jump straight in. Okay, so I've been thinking about the mystery of the Lost Primarchs a fair bit lately, and I've been wanting to have a few conversations around them, or about them should I say. Last week I kind of pondered if one could have been a Psyker, as Magnus of course was by far and away the most powerful Psyker amongst the Primarchs, the only one created to man the Golden Throne, with no backup or alternative. A bit of a rarity and unusual amongst the Primarchs, who the Emperor seemingly created a lot of overlapping traits and abilities in. Redundancies, if you will. And that's led me on to the discussion today, where I want to discuss the more forgotten aspect of the Lost Primarchs, their legions. As we ask what roles did they fulfill? Who had one of the Lost Legions as their redundancy? Does looking at the legions make it easy to predict where the Lost Primarchs would have fit in? And in truth, I think it actually might, because if we look at the legions, we can see comparisons and overlapping traits fairly easily. The spearhead assaults of the Lunar Wolves, shared with the Blood Angels and Space Wolves in a way. Then of course we have the battle fury of the Angels and the Sons of Rus, which overlaps with the ferocity of the World Eaters. We have the World Eater Wars of Annihilation, which in a admittedly very different way overlaps with the Dark Angels and the Death Guard. Then the Dark Angels' adaptability matches that of the Ultramarines, the Emperor's Children, the Death Guard resilience with the Iron Hands, the Salamanders, the Iron Warriors. We have the ambush preference of the Raven Guard, contrasted with that of the Night Lords, and even the Alpha Legion, the White Scars. And so again and again we see countless areas of overlap between the legions, all of course fully intended by the Emperor. And so where might the two Lost Legions have slotted in? Well, we'll obviously never know for sure, but I think we can make some logical guesses. And I think it's key to remember we're talking about functions and role traits, as opposed to character, as that's a very different conversation. The glaring option I'll get out the way right away goes hand in hand with that previous conversation regarding Magnus the Red. And why didn't he have an alternative? As you can really see that hole within the legions too. The Thousand Sons really were quite unique. There's really nothing else like them amongst the legions, and no one who in truth comes close to overlapping and fulfilling the same role. So you could easily see, in my mind at least, one of the Lost Legions being heavily Psyker focused, especially considering how effective they were. The Thousand Sons well and truly punching far above their weight. However, like I discussed in that Magnus conversation, I think there is also a very good possibility Magnus and the Thousand Sons were simply always going to be unique, kept alone, for one reason or another. So while it seems to be the most obvious option to me, it might not be the most realistic one. Now, another legion I don't see a real partner to is the Alpha Legion. Yeah, there is a little similarity with the Raven Guard, a little bit of infiltration and ambush, but I really see the Raven Guard as far more similar to the Night Lords, just a far more honourable version. The Raven Guard are generally more a guerrilla style of warfare, than any real form of subterfuge and espionage. The Alpha Legion really does embody and live that on a level where there is no real comparison, with even the Raven Guard being a bit of a stretch. And so I think there's definitely room for another Legion to share that domain, far closer to the Alpha Legion than any other we've seen. And heck, that spying and observation could have maybe been the reason that one of the Lost was eradicated. Maybe discovering one of the Emperor and Malkador's many secrets, turning against them because of it. Who knows? Maybe even Omegon was supposed to be the 2nd or 11th Primarch. That technically he wasn't lost at all. Maybe the twins were always supposed to be separate Primarchs with separate legions. What an explanation that would be, answering both the riddle of the twins and the identity of one of the Lost Primarchs in one go. It's a complete and utter crazy rabbit hole theory, no doubt, but hey, it actually could work. However, regardless, all that aside, the simple fact is the Alpha Legion don't really have another Legion who shares their traits and style that closely. And so I'd say one of the Lost Legions definitely becomes a possibility. Now, another Legion I could see one of the Lost partnering is the White Scars. Yes, we could say here that the hit and run preference of the Scars is shared by the Raven Guard. And yes, it is in some ways, there's no doubt about it. But I definitely think there's another speed-focused role that could be filled. A Legion that performed that outlier role within the larger crusade. A mirror to the Scars on the other side of the galaxy. The unknown factor. And remember, we're not talking the shamanistic Riders of the Storm character here. Just the role and traits possessed by the Legion. And I think amongst all the Legions, if we stand back and look, the White Scars are definitely one who stands largely alone. Not having a ton of overlapping traits like the Blood Angels did, for example. Mortarion spoke of how he believed he and Jagatai shared a bond of being separate and outliers amongst their brothers. But I'm really not sure about that. I think that's more on Mortarion's nature than what I see from his Legion. And so again, I definitely think there's room for another Legion here that has far more similarities to the White Scars than we've ever seen from another. However, moving on, the final Legion I'm going to say may be a bit controversial and the least likely one yet, as admittedly they do share many similarities with others already, is the Salamanders. Yes, I know, the Salamanders share that resilience and weathering the storm of the Iron Warriors, the Iron Hands and the Death Guard. And maybe it is breaking my own criteria of being more a character trait, but I don't see any Legion that comes close to putting humanity's safety as paramount as the Salamanders do. There are many Legions that are honourable, that know what it is that they are all fighting for, the ordinary people, but it's really only the Salamanders that will categorically do anything they can, even risking losing a battle, to defend the people, who truly puts the people first. And so I could definitely see a shared similarity there amongst one of the Lost Legions, perhaps even a water mirror to that of Vulcan's fire. I'll admit this one's particularly unlikely, with Vulcan very much being the heart of the Primarchs. But hey, the Primarchs and the Astartes do have two hearts after all. And what better solution to the reason one of the Lost turned, when we know it most likely wasn't the Ruinous Powers, and that it still threatened the ideals of the Great Crusade and unity amongst humanity in some way, because it was for the good of humanity. Perhaps coming to believe the bloodletting of the Crusade was not the way to do it, almost a legion more akin to the Tau Empire. I mean, you could understand it. Vulcan himself is a very reluctant general after all. Perhaps it is unlikely, but I think it could well fit. But so, for me, those are really the prime contenders for the roles of the Lost Legions that I can really see. Partners and overlapping the Thousand Sons, the Alpha Legion, the White Scars, and the Salamanders. And so I guess the question is for you. In what roles do you think the Lost 2 Legions would have performed? Which legions do you think their traits would have overlapped with? What gaps do you see amongst the legions when it comes to the Emperor's redundancies? As always everyone, leave your thoughts in the comments below. A huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too? But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.